Welcome to Environmental Intelligence, Episode 34. It's May 15th, 2026. Friday briefing, let's cover what matters before the weekend. Federal electricity strategy advances electrification targets but leaves implementation timelines and provincial coordination gaps unresolved. The federal electricity strategy signals a clear shift toward electrification as the core compliance pathway for industrial and utility projects. British Columbia has approved new renewable power investments under its 2025 Call for Power, creating immediate opportunities for site assessment work. A separate analysis projects up to $200 billion in clean energy capital deployment nationally, contingent on faster permitting. Practitioners should map current project portfolios against these federal and provincial signals this week. The federal electricity strategy explicitly recognizes electrification as the primary mechanism for meeting industrial and utility demand growth. Previous federal approaches emphasize broad emissions reductions without mandating electrification pathways in project approvals. The new strategy stops short of setting binding timelines or clarifying how provincial regulators must integrate these priorities into existing environmental assessment processes. Consultants managing federal impact assessments or provincial permitting for power and industrial clients now face uncertainty over whether electrification requirements will be treated as mandatory design criteria or merely guidance. Project schedules for any facility relying on grid connections or on-site generation should be stress tested against potential future alignment mandates. No specific effective date or amendment to the Impact Assessment Act is stated in the current release. British Columbia approved multiple renewable power projects under its 2025 Call for Power. The approvals direct investment toward clean electricity generation that supports industrial load growth. The approvals create new compliance obligations for baseline environmental studies and ongoing monitoring at project sites. Proponents must now align submissions with provincial expectations for long-term emissions reductions tied to these investments. A new analysis indicates Canada could attract up to $200 billion in clean energy capital if federal and provincial approval processes are accelerated. The report highlights that current timelines for environmental reviews and permitting remain the primary constraint on deployment. Firms providing Phase 1 and 2 assessments or remediation support for energy infrastructure should prepare capacity forecasts for increased project volumes. You arrive at a proposed battery storage or transmission substation site where the client's internal schedule assumes a 6-month environmental assessment window. The federal electricity strategy now signals that electrification components will receive priority weighting in future federal reviews. Yet no updated guidance has been issued on how baseline groundwater or soil vapor data must be collected to support those reviews. In practice, this means the standard CCME Tier 1 sampling grid may need expansion around proposed electrical infrastructure corridors. Stray current and thermal effects from new equipment can alter local redox conditions and contaminant mobility. Experienced practitioners notice that early installation of nested monitoring wells at the down-gradient edge of the proposed footprint often reveals seasonal groundwater mounding that standard Phase 2 programs miss. This directly affects risk assessment conclusions under provincial CSR or EPEA frameworks. The most common mistake is treating the electrification element as a simple add-on to an existing site plan rather than re-evaluating the entire conceptual site model for induced electrical fields. The fix is to insert a targeted stray current and thermal effects screen into the work plan before the first sampling round. If you are working on any current Impact Assessment Act files involving power or industrial electrification, review the Federal Electricity Strategy document for implications. Update proposal templates to include expanded baseline monitoring scopes for projects tied to British Columbia's 2025 Call for Power approvals. Brief clients on the $200 billion clean energy investment projection and its linkage to faster permitting expectations. Confirm current project schedules against potential future federal-provincial alignment requirements on electrification pathways. Monitor federal follow-up guidance on the electricity strategy for any new Impact Assessment Act procedural updates expected within 30 days. Track British Columbia project-specific environmental assessment commencement notices for the newly approved renewable power sites. Watch for any provincial responses to the federal electrification emphasis that could alter Ontario or Alberta permitting timelines for similar infrastructure. Tomorrow, watch for any federal clarification on how electrification priorities will interact with existing provincial permitting processes. That covers today's environmental intelligence. If you found this useful, share it with a colleague who needs to stay current. We're back tomorrow morning. This episode used AI voice synthesis of my voice. Editorial selection and analysis are my own.